Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this series on the Awakening the Illumined Heart Workshop interviews of the teachers. Come back again. Thank you for following our series. Tonight with us is Jason, and let's give him a big welcome. Thank you for being with us. I'll start with the simple questions for you, and so please tell us your name and how you say it properly.
Hi, Gabrielle. My name's Jason Hunt, and yeah, it's pretty easy to say.
Yeah, I'm glad. It's an easy one.
Yeah,
You'll forgive my wrong spelling and wrong way of saying it for all the other teachers and any other names that
we're
I've
all over the world. I get it. Yep.
eaten up in the interviews previous. So, Ron, why don't Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are and where you come from?
Okay. Right now, I'm living in Asheville, North Carolina. I'm kind of tucked up in the mountains up here of Western North Carolina, and a lot of people have said, "Oh, you live in Asheville. Isn't that like the Eastern Sedona?" It really kind of is. Everybody has heard about Sedona and the vortexes there. There's a lot of vortexes here too. Sedona is much more masculine, and where I'm at is much more feminine. The mountains are very old, and they kind of hold you and enclose you like a mother's arms. So there's a lot of energy here, and that's, I believe, part of why Mother Earth has me stationed here for now. But yeah, I'm just hanging out in the beautiful mountains here.
Nice, beautiful environment is always amazing to live in. A lot of us are in the cities and are trying to escape and move away. I have a lot of
Yeah.
New York friends that are just scattering away from the city.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
wait, and so Jason, where you're from there, or you're from somewhere
I'm
else?
I'm not. I grew up in the Detroit area in a big city and the suburbs thereabouts. And Asheville is it's a fairly large city. It's about 250,000 people, maybe 300,000. But there's a lot more people kind of outside, and it's more rural. It's a smaller big city. It's not like Atlanta or New York, certainly. So I grew up mostly up there in Detroit. I've moved around several times in my life, and it's all been in the United States. I have done some traveling. Most of that has been in the United States as well. I've seen coast to coast the United States. So yeah, and that does bring us to
Next
uh,
question.
yes, thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
Okay, I'm a high school graduate. When I was graduating high school, I graduated when I was 16, which is a little bit early for some folks. I remember having this insight as I was going up to the graduation line, my cap and gown on and everything, that the soul is responsible for its own education. So I attempted college and did that route for one semester, and realized that the School of Life was much more not only inviting to me, but much more attractive. And that's where I was going to really receive my education. So I went on the road with a band called the Grateful Dead, and I learned a lot of being on the road for 7 years with them. Um, there's a phenomenon in the United States called deadheads, and there was anywhere from 10 to 20,000 of us traveling around all the time. And you'd see friends from coast to coast. So that was a big part of my education, just experiencing life. And then somewheres along the line, I learned about spirituality. I started with Christianity. I was born into a Christian tradition. And then I started branching out probably when I was about 10 or 12 years old, somewhere's in there, and realizing that there were other traditions in the world besides just the Christianity that I was born into. And when I was on my exploration after I realized that college wasn't quite going to work for me, I started really getting interested and immersing myself in these traditions. So, for instance, you mentioned the Siddha yogis. I've been deeply immersed with the Kriya yogis, Kundalini yogis, the Sufis. And most of this has come by my exposure to Drunvalo and his work, because when I was 24 years old, I found Drunvalo, and I found this video first. And this guy was talking about everything that I was interested in. He was talking about, and maybe we should save most of this for a later question, but he was talking about everything, like from the human light body to sacred sites on the planet, and dolphins and whales, and the children of the new consciousness. And so I got led into that path very quickly. And again, it was like a fish to water. I just took to it. I learned who Drunvalo's teachers were, and then I started going to them myself, or trying to find them. So that led me to Sufism. That led me to the Kriya yogis. That led me to Kundalini yoga. That led me to doing these deep practices rather than just reading a book. I want to bite the apple rather than just talk about it. So does that answer pretty well?
Absolutely, absolutely did. The next question would be about your career, former career, or but I assume you've been a teacher all your life, probably.
I probably have. I know that I have been born to do this. I know that this is my purpose for coming in this lifetime. And I probably, if you talk to my friends and family, I probably have been a teacher all my life. They've probably been subjected to this, wake up, and why aren't you doing, this and that and the other thing. Um, so yeah, probably. I have done a lot of different things to make money. I'm not sure that I have a career. If I have a career, it's probably teaching. But I use jobs as a means to an end, and it's basically to survive and to make money. And I haven't had to do that since I've started teaching, which has been a real blessing. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later with more questions.
Okay, cool. So the next question will be, how did you meet? And you kind of answer already, but I'll ask it formally. How did you meet Drunvalo, and then how did you participate in a teacher training?
Mhm. Okay. I first came to a video of June Velos. Actually, the first thing was a book. Um, and the video came almost simultaneously. The video was an old interview with Drunvalo called A Conversation with Drunvalo Melchizedeck. And he literally was talking about everything I was interested in, from dolphins and whales to crystalline energy fields around our bodies, and uh, uh, sacred sites and UFOs and the new consciousness on the planet, and just everything. Everything was wrapped up into this 2.5 hours. So I watched it and watched it and watched it. And within 3 months, I found myself in what was then called a Flower of Life workshop. And back then, this was in the mid 90s. We were called to a facilitator's house, and they would uh, they would take us through a few situations, ceremonies, and stuff, and be there as an example. But it was mostly watching VHS tapes for about 8 hours a day. And we learned the Merkaba in the old synthetic way. I had actually learned it from that book that came right at the same time as the video for me, a book called Nothing in This Book is True, but It's Exactly the Way Things Are. And it's by Bob Frizell.
Mhm.
And that book contained a whole chapter on Drunvalo and then a whole chapter on the Merkaba meditation. So that's where I started doing it. Then I got to the Flower of Life workshop a few months later and made sure I was doing it right, and continued with that for, you had to do it for anywhere from 2.5 to 3 years every day to make it permanent. So I was doing that. That was my practice. That was the first formal meditation practice that I did daily. And I'd say probably by the time 1997, 1998, it was fully permanent around me. Then I met Drunvalo in 97 for my first, at that time it was an Earth Sky workshop. And he was doing these little 3-day workshops at that time. And met him in December of 97, and then went back with the woman that I married in November of the next year. And we got married and we had plans, and we were both going to become Flower Life facilitators. And getting a little personal here, uh, we couldn't afford both of us to go through the training at the same time. So we put her through the training first. And I got to go to Arizona with her, and I met some of the Flower Life facilitators who are now ATI teachers. And didn't get to hang out with Drunvalo then, but she did. And then we came home and promptly got a divorce. And I dropped all of those dreams of becoming a teacher. And um, I kept with the teachings and I kept with Drunvalo, watching his work. But I, quite honestly, I didn't feel worthy to be in his presence. I kind of self-exiled myself for many, many years. And I felt like I'd done something wrong, had my marriage fail. So like, what am I not doing right? So I knew the Kriya Yoga and the Sufism was going to work with my heart. So I kept with that and kept with my practices. And in 2011, I saw that Drunvalo was opening a new school called the School of Remembering, and that he was training new teachers. And he had already trained one batch, and he was going to have one more training, they said. And this last training was going to be in Mexico. And I was literally about to log off the page and just X out of it. And I felt this kick in the seat of my pants. And my guys were like, "That's it, go. You're supposed to go to that." And I'm like, "What? I can't." And all these things, all the resistance came up. And one impossibility after another became not only possible, but happened. And a few months later, I found myself in Sedona hugging Drunvalo again
Awesome.
and rekindling my dreams. So,
Beautiful. I'm really glad it happened.
yes, me too. Thank you. Huge.
Yeah. Um, so the next question will be, how long have you been teaching the ATIH? We should say 8 years.
Oh, well, since 2012 was when I was
So
certified.
9 years. 9 years.
Yes, 9 years.
And
Yeah.
you've been teaching on a regular basis, monthly, I assume.
Yes, I usually do bi-monthly at the most, but yeah,
Right. Awesome. That's pretty amazing. And one of you guys have been teaching it like weekly. And I was, what? I mean,
yeah,
do you have
uh,
time to sleep sometimes?
yeah, right. One of our teachers who's now passed on, James Morrison, he was a dear friend of mine, and he was teaching weekly and getting very stressed out and not taking time for himself. And yeah, he's not teaching anymore. Well, on this realm, let's say.
he's
He's
he's done the job. He's like, okay, I'm done.
he's graduated to the next level. But
Graduate to the next level, exactly.
yes.
So my next question is really digging into your personal experience. That's what's most exciting about the process for me, and um, why I'm doing this interview series. And so please tell us how you experienced the Merkaba and what kind of experiences of the Merkaba you had. So since you went from the flower of life to the ATIH, you not only experienced the first phase, but also the second phase, the current phase, from the mind into the heart. And so I don't know if you want to talk about it first, Merkaba and then ATIH, but I would love you to dig into your personal experience of the Merkaba and then the tiny space of the heart and how you use both of them.
Hmm, okay. All right. I'll go kind of chronologically here. My first experiences of the Merkaba were with the synthetic method when we were doing the 17 breaths and the mudras and all that stuff, visualizations and whatnot. And one of the very, very first experiences that I had was uh, I was sitting in my room and I had done the meditation and I could feel my Merkaba spinning around me. And I was like taking a car for a test drive. I was like, let's see what this baby can do. So I immediately, my first thing was let's call in Drunvalo. So I called in Drunvalo, and this sort of golden oval sort of appeared in my room with him on the inside. And again, this is not, I'm not seeing with these eyes, I'm seeing with this eye. And he's like, yes, what you call me here for? And I said, can you explain to me some more about this whole dimensional levels and how they're related to music thing? Because I'd read something about that. And he gave me this big flash of a download. I was like, whoa, whoa, hey, all right, hey, yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm going to decipher that in a little bit. But that was one of my very, very first experiences. So I understood, again, this is real and this is happening, but it wasn't like I could just call up June below and say, hey, did you experience that too? It wasn't until, uh, geez, I think it was 2 or 3 years later where I actually saw him in person, and I started asking him this sort of stuff. And one of the things I found from him is that, for instance, when he goes to sleep, he sends out his dream body to to where it needs to go, to help people, to teach people, to comfort people, whatever he can do on that level. So I know that he's working on those levels, and that was confirmation enough for me that that was real, and it wasn't just my mind making this stuff up. It goes further than that, though. I remember when I was doing the meditation one morning, I was on a bus out to California from Detroit, and it was about a 2.5 hour, or excuse me, 2.5 days on a bus. So I remember waking up in the morning and doing my meditation, and not only could I feel my Merkaba around me, I could feel the tires of the bus underneath me. I could feel actually the gas tank and the luggage underneath there, and like tell almost how much gas was in the bus. I could feel the cars as they were driving by and passing us and all that stuff. So that was another very palpable, visceral experience of the Merkaba. I remember another time, this was before I met him, but I was still doing the meditation before I met Drunvalo. I was walking to the park. I was just walking down the sidewalk, and I was feeling my Merkaba around me. And I was realizing, oh, that tree that I'm looking at has a Merkaba around it. And like the grass that I was walking by, each one of the grass, not the blades, but each grass plant has its own little Merkaba. And this bug flew by. Bzz, oh, that bug has a Merkaba, and the sun's got a Merkaba, and Mother Earth's got a Merkaba. And as I was identifying with my Merkaba, I was seeing how, again, this is a blueprint for creation, how all of creation has this field around it. And there was a moment of resonance that a deep communication took place that's way beyond words or anything that I could even put into words or thought form. Um, the image probably best describes it. So that was another experience of the Merkaba that happened very early on that has been, again, very, uh, it was a deep experience and very meaningful to me. That's how I'd say it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And so,
Yeah.
how did the transition go into the heart, in the tiny space of the heart?
Mhm. Um, so when I was in my sort of exile period there, I
Post,
uh,
you mean post divorce?
yes, post divorce and before I did the training, I was reading Drunvalo's Living in the Heart book. I was, keeping up with his information and his teachings as best I could, and in there it describes moving into the heart. And as I was reading the book, every time that I would set it down and do the meditation on my own, I would get to this point of just about to move into my heart, and it felt like my heart was racing, and it felt like it was gonna explode. I felt like I was gonna have a heart attack. Fear was coming up, and I backed off. Um, so
So that happened every time you did the exercise in meditation.
yes, yep, and I did it probably 3 times, I believe. So by the time I got the kick in the seat of the pants and was there with Drunvalo in Sedona. We have a healing day in the workshop, and it was my turn to be healed on the healing day. Everybody goes through it, and Drunvalo's, he's got this huge uh, area with usually 150, 160 people, and everybody is divided up into groups, and we all get healing. So I was in Sedona. I was reconnecting with one of my greatest teachers, if not my greatest teacher, Drunvalo. And, I was like, if I die, I die. This is a great place for it. So, I said, damn the torpedoes, and I'm going to do it anyway. And we had an elder gentleman in our little healing group who was in his 80s, and he was getting ready to see the other doorway of life here. He was getting ready to pass on. And when I went into my heart, you know, this time when I went in, I felt the fear. My heart's racing. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack and die. And I said, just do it. And I went in and I felt the fear and did it anyway. That's become one of my mottos. And the fear dissipated and I opened my heart and I was like, ah. Well, that elder gentleman, when we came out of the meditation, he said to me, he took me aside and said, I could feel it when you opened your heart. So that was a huge, huge thing for me. So the next days of that workshop were about going into her heart. And at the end of that workshop, I activated my Merkaba in this new way without the 13 breath method. And it was a huge, huge difference. I've heard it said it's the difference between like trying to drive a Mack truck through 3 feet of mud, which you can do, and you put the pedal to the metal and get the horsepower going and you can do it. Or, the difference between that and like riding a spaceship. And it's like, what mud? What? There's mud down there? Oh. So going into my heart was a huge, huge, big step. Getting this new Merkaba was another big, big step. And having access to the tiny space and being able to go in there anytime I want. First off, I can find guidance, pure, true, complete guidance anytime I want from within. And I might still have outer sort of things too. I might ask for a sign or look at something on the astrological charts or whatnot. But I always, always, always have this connection within. So that's huge from my point of view. It was a really big thing for me, and I've seen it be big in other people's lives as well. And then the Merkaba, as well as uh, the new Merkaba, when it's activated from a place of unity. So it functions as a unified field. Most of life is functioning from a unified field. There's this little tiny sliver of life that we call 3D reality that is in, we call it either duality consciousness or polarity consciousness. And it's not really either of those. It's never two-ness. It's always a three-ness. But it looks like two at first, mommy and daddy, me and you, up and down, all that sort of stuff, all those polarities. So being able to come to unity, even though you're in duality, is a whole other level of really goodness. Coming home, remembering yourself. Again, these are words that we're putting on it, but it's deeper than that. So hear the words, but also hear I can't say what's behind the words, please.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges in the self-development or spiritual side of things, or sadhana, the way they say it in the Indian tradition. It's having the experience, recognizing the experience, and articulating the experience. And the last two are even harder than having the first one. Is
Yes.
that, I mean, like, having the experience, it's possible, but understanding it and then articulating it, it's literally meaning that you worked and contemplated and looked at it. And also sometimes there are experiences that cannot be recognized unless you hear someone else's experience.
Yes. Yes.
No,
Very, very true.
and I want to quote the tradition of the yogis that had spontaneous movements in their body, and they entered asanas without their volition, without their intention behind it. You can easily freak out when your legs are starting to move on your own, or your hands are doing stuff, or your neck snaps, and you're like, holy cow, it just happened. I didn't do that. I didn't want to do that. And very easily people can misinterpret that and think, there's a demon in the room and it wants to kill me, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then if you hear a yogi talking about it and explaining pretty clearly, these are kriyas, and I've had them multiple times, and at some point I was roaring like a lion, and I'm quoting Swami Muktananda in the Play of Consciousness right now. It makes a huge, massive difference, because first of all, you recognize someone else had the same experience, and second, you don't. There's no demon in your room, and you don't think you're going nuts because someone
Yes.
else actually had it. And that's the value also, I think, about these interviews. Hearing you guys talking about your own experience of the heart and the Merkaba is invaluable. And it's something that needs to be collected one way or the other and then shared so that people can refer to it in the future at some point.
I feel you're true, and I really appreciate what you're doing. This work that you're doing is, it's. I feel that you are answering a call from Mother Earth and Father Sky, and that this is a part of the collective dream that you're manifesting. So once again, I honor you and your work, and I thank you very
Pleasure.
much.
I'm actually doing it very selfishly at the moment because I want to hear all about it.
And so usually how it starts. Yep, that's
Yeah,
good.
that's exactly it. And so, want to describe how you got into the heart, and what can you articulate what was that fear and why you felt like you needed to keep your heart protected and closed? Because
Mm,
I've never had the and forgive me if I sound judgmental here. I don't mean to. I never had this experience of having to open the heart, like,
okay.
or fear of going there, or rushing it. And so
Yes.
I'm asking just to understand a little better.
Yeah, it does come from, it's an illusion, of duality and others. And it's, it's stemmed in fear. All fear is illusion. It's, um, a lot of people think that hate and love are opposites. I, from my point of view, love and fear are opposites. And fear keeps us out of love. And where there's love, there's no fear. There's a certain fearlessness. So it was fear. It was fear of loss. I had been through this divorce. I got married. I thought it was going to be for all time, forever, and all this stuff. And that didn't happen. Um, Shortly after my divorce, I lost my job. I was working at Whole Foods at the time. And then when 9/11 happened, everybody knows about uh, 9/11 in 2001. My soon-to-be ex-wife called me up that morning and was like, turn on the television, and I watched the towers coming down, and I was like, that really sucks, but this has already happened in my life. My life is already, a shambles, and has been for months now. So all of those losses felt like parts of me going away, and like, what am I to do? How do I get that back? How do I come back to wholeness and to my center and to my heart? So all of those were, we talk about soul retrieval with shamanism. They're kind of parts of ourselves. This is called the school of remembering, not just because it's about remembering here. It's about, from my point of view, it's about putting the members back in our circle, our sacred circle of ourselves that make us whole. None of us came here individually, first off. We all have a mommy and a daddy and a soul group. Um, and none of us are here just for ourselves. We are for our own development, but we're also here to spark and catalyze other people. And many times that's the greater part of what we're here for, though it doesn't look like it because we're all concerned about ourselves and our own personal path. So that's one of the things that I've learned from all this stuff is uh, all of these fears that I had that were keeping me out of being in my heart. First off, they're illusory. Like I mentioned earlier, feel the fear and do it anyway is one of my mottos. But I've learned that this is the human condition. It's what most people are dealing with out here. So you can't see if I'm moving my hand over my first two chakras. In doing this sort of work down here, having injuries first and then healing them, I've found that they're gifts that I can offer other people. I found that it's a blessing, and that, for instance, I wouldn't want to go to a marriage counselor who had a perfect marriage and had never had an argument with their mate. I want somebody who I can identify with, and who's going to give me some advice. So, maybe a good marriage counselor would be somebody who has been through 3 or 4 marriages and failed at them. That's not what we would think right off. But when it comes down to it, I mean, it's like if I were a drug addict, I wouldn't want a drug counselor who hadn't been on drugs, who hadn't experienced what I've experienced. And they're just talking about it from some psychological point of view. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So all of these woundings and fears ended up becoming blessings.
Right. Yeah, I respect what you're saying, and it's a lot of people's perspective. Um, I don't know what I think on the subject. I just know that there's a deadline point where you're like, okay, enough is enough. I'm moving on. It's as simple as that. You decide,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. That's the truth that you can leave from then on. Problem is, there's strings attached, and sometimes there's pain associated to previous lifetimes or previous experience in the current lifetime that
Yes.
drags our emotional system down. And I have experienced that firsthand. If that's what I've not had a divorce, I have never been married, and these the but I can tell you I suffered a lot when I moved on from my previous spiritual, let's say, engagement,
Mm-hmm.
and it had to be done. It's as simple as that because it was becoming detrimental, self-destructive, and I was not willing to, um, be in that misery anymore. And so there was either stagnation, and I had experienced too much of that for too long, or say, okay, recognize everything I received. I'm really grateful. That's amazing, and let's move on. What's next? Let's move on. So that's the nature of the beast. There's only one certainty in life, and that's death. And so getting stuck into one job or the other, getting stuck because of money, which is probably what what people experience in their life, and also
Yeah.
emotional trouble. Getting emotions are like a cycle that we keep on rotating into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, you just have to come to a point where you decide and move on. It's like, okay, from now on, I'm gonna do ABC to not experience this frustration, or CBD to not experience this fear,
Yeah.
and I might be a little cutthroat because there are a lot of spiritual and psychological practices that help people to go through all of that accumulated pain and belief systems.
Mm-hmm.
But that has been my experience. You just gotta decide it's over and move on.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
And that's exactly what you were saying. Okay, it's all right. I don't give a shit. I'm gonna die. Let my body, let my heart explode, and then it didn't, and you had an amazing experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's what you're saying too, unless we come to terms with ourselves and what you were saying earlier, these three things of money and health and relationship, uh, it's really the first three chakra stuff. I keep saying to everybody, that's the work. That's the work. That's what keeps us from being in our hearts. That's what keeps us from being in our unconditional essence all the time. We identify with ourselves, and usually that's the first three chakra stuff. We can get on into all of that in classes and stuff, but there's really good maps and systems that help us. You said a key word there, belief structures, help us break down our belief structures, let go of them, see them for what they are. They're the limitations that we have on the reality. And there's only one reality, but there's 8 billion different human ways to interpret it, and they're all valid. And that's just the human ways on this planet. There's, think about the dolphins and the whales and, the bugs and the plants, and every being here is experiencing that one reality. But plants experience it as, the sun and the cycles, and I can feel the sun and now I can breathe. And, it's way different than being a human, for
Sure
instance.
is, absolutely. And who knows how many more billions of experience opportunities are out there. It still
Yes,
remains a fact of recognizing the experience for what it is and then articulating it and then implementing it again the way you want it, according to
you
your
got it.
personal intention.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. But I interrupted you at some point. Can you tell us your experience of going into a tiny space of the heart, and maybe with a pragmatical daily life
Hmm.
challenge that.
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite examples is if you happen to be having a difficult time with a relationship, friendship, or a lover, or just a family member, anybody, it doesn't matter who. Um, I've found that when I go into my tiny space and I bring that person in, and I don't even have to bring them close, just bring them in visually. Sometimes, if we're feeling good, we can sit across from each other and smile, or maybe even give each other a hug if we're feeling good about that. But if it's not feeling that good in the outer reality, just bring them in, just visually, and feel love for that person. And inevitably, it changes my outer reality. It changes how I feel about that person, and it changes how we interact, not just how I interact, but how they interact with me as well. So that's a very, very easy and very profound practice I've found to apply it to daily life.
That's so beautiful. You mentioned that. It's actually something that there's a similar practice that I learned to uh, apply when there is a challenging person or a challenging situation. I've done it with my brother because our relationship has been pretty challenged since childhood. It changed through years and it has improved heavily in the last few years. But fundamentally, write a letter and tell him everything that you're sorry for, and send him send him blessings,
Yes.
and state your intention of goodwill, whatever it is. I'm generalizing, but
Hmm.
it's a very similar. I mean, the going into the heart for that purpose literally goes to the to the core. I mean, where there is the unity field and the unity consciousness, and it goes straight to the person. It's connected to them. This process I was sharing, I've learned through the years, and it's literally like just writing. Maybe if you are courageous enough or you feel like it, you can give it to the other person. But just the process of going through it, it clarifies your own intention, clarifies your emotional system, your emotional body to face the pain or face the wrong or face the frustration, whatever the emotion it is, and then
Yes.
finding an outcome suitable for both parties.
Yes, exactly. A win-win situation.
Exactly, a win-win situation, which literally makes the relationship much better. And then on a subconscious level or an energetic level, whatever we want to call it, the other person will feel it. As soon as
Hmm.
they are back into your presence, they're more open and willing to this. They're not like grudgy and ready
Right.
to jump at your throat anymore. And you feel the difference immediately.
Yeah,
Thanks for
absolutely.
sharing.
I'm not sure if you've heard, you probably have, of Ho'oponopono.
Yeah.
It's a yeah, old Hawaiian Huna practice. It's basically the same stuff that we're talking about. They used to get their whole families together, even if it was just two kids squabbling. They'd get their whole families together, bring everybody out, and it's shortened down now in the New Age community, but it's the same concept. It's finding this situation where everybody wins.
And then offered blessings. Okay, so the next question is still about pragmatical outcomes of the use of the Merkaba and the tiny space of the heart. and so either organic or synthetic merkaba. and
Okay.
and feel free to share experiences from the workshops or that you've witnessed from your students. And so it's the idea that these experiences possibly related to those three corners of life that define happiness in everyone's world, and they are money, health, and relationships. We talked about relationships right now. Also, money and health are are the three big pillars, if you want, if we want to call them like this, in the three big variables in the equation to achieve happiness. After which, achieved which, people are starting going, they're going to be bored and start finally turning inside or
Yeah.
asking questions about life and eventually approach the spiritual path.
Yeah.
And but most people are kind of far away from it and have either a lot of problems with money or health or relationships. So what is your recommendation, and what kind of uh, experiences you've witnessed for yourself or your students in light of those three
O-
variables?
Okay. Those three variables are they're found throughout traditions around the world, um, and they are, from my point of view, first three chakra stuff. Um, it's our first chakra has to do with security and is it safe to be here? That's usually has to do with money, and has to do with health a little bit as well. Second chakra is about relationships. You mentioned that's one of the points. Third chakra is about power and control, and it's about, again, how do we make ourselves secure, usually through relationships, and how do we acquire money, this sort of thing. Right relationships to all of those. Uh, the Buddhists talk about right orientation, right occupation, right relationships, all these eightfold path, the Buddhist thing. Um, for myself, I know I've had near-death experiences, I guess is what they're called, since uh, basically since I was born. When I was 6 months old, I was struck by lightning. Um, I was born blue, supposedly, with a hole in my heart, and the doctors said they were going to have some operation, and it closed up by itself. Um, yeah, I was born with other traumas. Like I had the frenulum underneath your tongue, that connective tissue that had grown forward. So I was born tongue tied and I couldn't lift my tongue. I will have been speaking to you like this unless they clipped that when I was 3 years old. So those sorts of things, those traumas, quote unquote, had to be cleared and brought to terms with, um, for my health to be here, for me to be in this body and to feel secure. That's root chakra stuff. Um, that was largely an internal process for me, for this body and its consciousness. Uh, I, I'm not sure that a lot of people can relate to some of this stuff. Maybe you can, but for instance, I remember um, I was born with lung diseases. Uh, my mother smoked tobacco while I was in her womb and up until the time I was nursing for a while, and then she quit. So that carried over into myself and my body. And I remember being in these oxygen tents when I was uh, several times before I was 3 years old. And I didn't know it at the time. I was just being a kid. But everybody around me, the parents, and the doctors and everybody thought I was going to die. And I didn't, I was just experiencing. But I do remember my father coming in one day. He was usually at work and he had taken off work. And I remember he came in from lunch. And I remember him crying with me. And that was a really impacting moment. Why is this strong man having these emotions and all that sort of stuff? So I remember deciding to stay in this body and do whatever I can, fix the brain that's been struck by lightning and fix the lungs and all that sort of stuff. And um, I didn't know how to do this, but I knew that my body could heal itself. I knew that my body has an innate intelligence. I just trusted that, and it's turned out fairly well. Um, so that's the health thing, pretty much. The wealth thing, I've learned to um, let go and let God, is the simplest way to say it. I've always been taken care of. I know that I'm always going to be taken care of. That doesn't necessarily mean all my wants are fulfilled all the time, but I'm definitely all my needs are.
Yeah,
So,
that's a beautiful way of putting it. It's a lot of, I mean, there's never end to how much money we could want, right?
right.
And let's be honest, most of the time the challenge with money is the feeling at ease with how much we have. Not
Yes.
not not as much, not as much. It's like literally feeling like, okay, there's a cushion I can land on. So
Yes, exactly.
maybe you don't even use it. It's just there. Don't even
Hmm.
think about investing it. You don't have, a lot of people don't have that kind of mentality. There's a lot of people that are driven. They want more money, more money, more money, buy this, this, and that, and that's all their life it's about. And that's fine. That's great. I think there's a balance in between
Yes.
where it's good to have that cushion and not have. And I think the fundamental goal here is never worry about money.
Yes.
Whether it's minimal and you're happy and content and taken care of, or whether it's a lot and you don't worry about it. Either way, the fundamental goal is never worry about money. Because otherwise
Exactly.
your life is just miserable, making money, making money, making money.
Yes, yes. It's these desires and attachments, and part of this is nature. You have a desire to eat because your stomach's empty. That's a natural desire, and there's a sort of attachment to food that comes with that as well. A lot of us are even dropping out of that anymore, and there's more and more breatharianism coming on, but that's a whole other subject.
Yeah, or to go to the next Drunvalo's meeting or course in
Right.
India, or whatever, or drive a Lambo, or who knows. Everyone has their own
Mm-hmm.
desires.
Drunvalo's got new books coming out, so that's going to cost some
Yeah,
money.
I heard that.
Yeah.
I heard that one. That's going to be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I've learned about these attachments is that you don't have to pull them up by the roots. You can fulfill them or let them go. But if they're unfulfilled, they'll come back, if it's your work to do. If you can let them go, you can let them go, and you probably won't have to deal with it again. So it's
Yeah,
easier that way.
yeah. It's a funny one. Honestly, I think it depends on repercussions. Or
Mm,
you gotta choose whether it's beneficial or pleasurable.
yes. Yeah.
Whether it's gonna have a negative repercussion or a or a long-term positive beneficial repercussion, right?
Hmm.
You can't have ice cream every single day, twice a day, right? You
Right.
have it on
Right.
Sundays after your meditation or after your walk or taking your girlfriend, whatever it is, like
Hmm.
once in a week or a month or once a week or whatever. That is, you got to find your own balance. I mean, who knows? I'm Italian. I used to grow up on ice creams. There was a time when I was a child I had one a day during the summer, especially. But um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you grow up and different attachments come and different attachments go, and it's a natural process, is what I found.
yeah,
So at some point, you don't eat ice cream every day. At some point, you get tired of eating sweets, and you want the one who created sweets and the one who gave you the desire to have sweets in the first place, and the organs to taste sweetness. That's a Rumi poem, basically. Do you want sweets, or do you want the one who created sweetness?
oh, interesting. I never thought about it. Oh, that's a good one.
Right on.
Is this coming from a Sufi tradition?
Yeah, Jalaluddin Rumi.
Ah,
He's a poet. Yeah, in the 12th century or 13th century over in Turkey.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah. The master of love. They call him the poet of
Yes,
love.
you know him, the Whirling Dervishes. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so we talked about relationships and how the pillars work, but um, and you gave us this beautiful experience of the heart and reconnecting relationships wise. Did you want to say anything else about the other pillars and the use of the Merkaba or the tiny space of the heart?
We do talk more about that in the workshop, in the regular ATI workshop, but also in the advanced workshop that I offer. Some of us are offering an advanced class, and that's part of what I offer is how to live this stuff, how to bring it into your daily life and to actually apply it. So
Awesome.
we do talk about it there.
Nice. Okay, so you guys, if you want to know more, go straight to Jason's website, and we'll mention it at the end. We'll put it in the description down here so you can know and experience a little bit more and learn more. My next question for you, Jason, is about the um, ascension process and evolution of humanity and Earth evolution. You know, in 2000 there was this biblical end of the world where it was thousand, no more thousand. We thought the Christ was coming, and then 2012, end of Mayan calendar, the world was ending. And then now with this current situation, the world's ended. Everybody's caged in the house, and we're gonna all die, absolutely dead. Everybody is gonna be having to be vaccinated. So, what's your opinion? What's going on right now, and what is evolution all about for you?
We are deep in some sort of evolution for sure. Um, One of the gauges that I use is my parents, believe it or not. They're blessedly still in their bodies. And my father is turning 80 this year. My mother will be 79 this year. Uh, when a few years ago this happened, they're asking me, "So, what is that stuff you're teaching, Jason?" Wow. When my parents are asking me, like, what's going on and, what's going on with the consciousness of the planet and what am I doing, I know something's happening. Um, I'm not sure what it is or the
Good
the
gauge.
time. What was it?
That's a good gauge, a good tracker.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it was.
If your
Uh,
parents ask you about spirituality, shit is
yeah,
changing.
yes, they're moving too. Yep, for sure. So there does seem to be again an individual transformation and individual awakening, and I call it cleansing and harmonizing of the consciousness. And then there's also the collective. And I think these sort of landmarks of events like the 2000 Y2K and the Mayan calendar in 2012, these are, first off, they're masculine. They're coming from our brains and they're points on the calendar. And the feminine is, uh, she's going to be ready whenever she's ready. It's the way I see it. It's like mommy and daddy are going on a date, and it's father son and mother earth in this case. And father son is like, he's got the car all warmed up out front and it's running, and he's at the front door saying, "Come on, honey, I've got the car warmed up. It's all ready to go. We're ready. Let's go to the party." And she's upstairs still going, "I don't know. Do I want to wear the blue one or the green one?" And she's going to be ready when she's ready. So it's not about when we want it to be ready, on a masculine time scale. It's going to be on her timing. And basically, she's not just waiting to figure out what to wear. She's waiting for us as her children, from my point of view. She's waiting for the right moment when enough of her children are awake that it's going to be this, the 100 monkey theory, the critical mass. And here's another way of looking at it. This is a slightly different angle, but it's the same subject. I'm pretty sure you've seen cymatics before, where they take a tone or a sound and they'll put it through a plate. And the plate will have either sand on it or iron filings, and it forms a geometry. And then they'll change the tone, and everything will jump around, and a new geometry, a new form will come out of that. Well, from my point of view, we're in between tones, and both of these levels are actually already here. We're in 3D. There's also 4D, and everybody's kind of jumping around, and we see this in our daily lives. People are moving, people are changing relationships, people are changing careers, all sorts of stuff. They're jumping around and finding their place in this new order, which is already here. It's like the buildings are already set up and the offices are ready for us to move in, but some of us don't. know about it yet, and we have to be directed. Hey, there's this whole other world that's waiting for you guys to inhabit. That's kind of how I see this. So the
I like
Merkaba
it.
is,
I like your metaphor. This is nice. This is a beautiful
yeah,
explanation. Um, we're changing tone, and hence the structures need to be changed. Are
mhm,
changing. No need to be changed. Are changed because there's a new tone in place.
yes,
Yeah, well said. Well, that's a beautiful metaphor. Thank you.
you're welcome. Yes.
Um,
The in the early stages of the Merkaba meditation are about connecting with our higher self, but also unplugging from the 3D grid and plugging into the 4D grid.
okay,
So
so the next question naturally begged is what are dimensions? How do you define or how do you experience them? And what is multidimensionality? Drunvalo talks about it multiple times, and I'd like to know what you think and what you experience them.
all right, a lot of people have different definitions of the dimensions, and I think that's where a lot of the discrepancies are coming from. From my point of view and my definitions, 3D reality is what almost everybody is experiencing, and it involves separation. It involves what we were saying earlier, duality or polarity, which is really, it's never two-ness, so there's always a third in there. But sometimes the third reconciling factor is difficult to see. Um, so, can you restate the question? Or,
It was a multiplicity of questions. So let's start
yeah,
with how do you experience multiple dimensions? What's your experience of third, fourth, fifth, and so on?
okay. Um, Fourth dimension is where everything that you think and feel instantaneously happens. It is instantaneously coming into the reality. That's happening where we are in 3D, but there's a time lag between what we're thinking and feeling and when it manifests. So there's because of that time lag, we can disassociate from it, and that's the separation. That's the oh, I didn't do that. It just came out of thin air, or God's doing that, or that's the Tao, or something like that. In 4D, you realize that God, the Tao, all of this, the creative potential is within you. And you, again, realize that what you're thinking and feeling becomes the reality. Um, I've experienced very clearly that when I'm in a state of love, when I am connected to the unified field, my Merkaba, my unified field, and as well that connects to Mother Earth's unified field, other skies, the universe, etc. When I'm in this state, the universe will respond to me. The outer world will respond to my inner world. Sometimes very, very, very quickly. Um, Sometimes it seems instantaneous. I've also noticed that when I'm in fear or this closed state, which again has to do with identification, me, I, and this worries of all these first three chakra stuff, which come from a sense of self and the self suffering, um, then the outer reality does not respond to my inner reality. I might think, geez, I wish things would lighten up and get better. And they don't because I'm in this state of fear. I've literally cut myself off and my creative potentials, my creative abilities and energies off from being effective. Uh, this is one of the real conundrums of this place and this work because um, ultimately we're all connected to God. We are all invited to this. I like to call it party in the heavens, which we used to call heaven. Everybody's fulfilled, everybody's um, happy, we don't have disease, this sort of stuff. We all know that there's a different way for us to be in life, but and I'm pointing to my heart. But it's difficult to know up here, when you have to pay bills and you got to, uh, you know,
The three
do
pillars,
all of these
the three
different things.
valuables. Yeah.
Yes. So the dimensionality stuff for people who are in 3D and are worried about these three pillars, it's like talking to somebody who's in the room about this outer world. They're not going to know what you're talking about. They probably won't be able to access it. Um, it's not that they don't have the ability to, they don't have the peace, they don't have the love, they don't have the openness to do that. So working on these first three chakras is, again, I call it the work, but it's basically identifying what keeps us out of being in love, what keeps us out of being in this connected state, because that's our the Buddhists say, the Taoists say, our natural state. That's our essence. So it's about getting back there. Another way of saying this, and perhaps some of the other teachers have mentioned this already, it's going from here, which is the brain is this polarized instrument, and it can only see in polarization and duality, and it's kind of like a hall of mirrors. It's moving one's consciousness from here back to the heart, which is a place of unity. So that's a dimensional shift. That's moving from 3D stuff and me, and I got to worry about these three pillars to the heart where it's unified and everything's taken care of, and it's a win-win situation for everybody. Mother Earth didn't bring you about just to make you starve or have hardships or have disease or any of this stuff. She wants to see you thrive and unfold your soul, just like Father Sky does. They want it to, and just like you do, they want to bring you to fruition also. That's what love really is. And Mother Earth and Father Sky really, really love us. So, from my point of view, most of the universe is in this unified state. They're 4D and above. And Mother Earth and Father Sky are holding that space as well as all the other beings in the universe until we come along, until we realize it really is okay, and we can open our hearts and we can be who we truly are. Um, yeah, does that more or less get you there?
Yeah, yeah.
Notice I don't even talk about 5D.
You don't.
No. 5D is formlessness, and I mean, we can barely imagine it, let alone put it in the mind. So I don't go there usually.
Okay, cool. So I'm just very curious about everyone's perception on the 5D and multidimensionality, simply because there's a lot of challenge in understanding. People understand 3 dimensions max. Some
Mm-hmm.
scientists introduce um, time and other variables as another dimension, and it becomes challenging where a lot of people to understand they don't quite know what they're talking. I mean, like, what is the fourth and the fifth? What do you experience? What do you not experience? It becomes
Right.
it becomes confusing at times,
Mm-hmm. That whole
especially with all these articles and individuals speaking about going into 5D. What does that entail? What does that mean? A lot of people have all these questions.
yes, yes. I can address that a little bit. Definitely, the dimensions we're talking about are not the scientific dimensions. Length, width, height, and then you add the fourth dimension of time moving through there. That's definitely what we're talking about. We are moving, from my definitions again, from 3D to
I'm gonna
4D.
I need to interrupt you.
Okay,
Forgive me. Can you hear me?
barely. It's breaking up over
This is
here
nothing
too.
against you. Yeah, that's nothing against you. I need to interrupt you. I slow down right now. Give me a second. Sorry.
It's kind of still breaking up for me. I can catch most of what you're saying.
Yeah, and I don't know if you feel like this.